Alright, hello and welcome to another EVE tutorial with your host Kamikat, attorney at law. This one has to deal with um, ship modules in general. It's more of a theory based course per se than anything else. So what the fuck, man? Seriously? What the fuck? That is just annoying. Alright. I was gonna have it look all professional and shit, but no. Fucking recording. Alright, anyways. Right on. Turrets. There are three kinds of turrets: the hybrid, the projectile, and the lasers. Each basically goes along with its own race of ship. Hybrids are used by the Caldari to a lesser extent, and the Galente on all their ships, projectiles by Minmatar, and lasers by Mar. Technically, you can fit any weapon on any ship, but the ship bonuses are significant enough that it benefits you greatly to fit the proper weapons on your ship. Also, there are two kinds of each of these. There are the blasters, the autocannons, and the pulse lasers in circles. These are the close-range weapons. And the rail, the artillery, and the beam are the long-range versions of these weapons. The way it works is the close-range ones obviously have a closer range, and they do more damage and have better tracking. The long-range ones do less damage and have worse tracking, but they're at a longer range. So that's the trade-off that you get there. Also, while we're still here, I'd like to go real quickly into the benefits and detriments of each of these kinds. Let's start off with the hybrid and work our way to the right. The hybrid turret blasters are the closest range weapon in the game, and once you get into that really close range, they do the most damage. They do kinetic and thermal, if I remember correctly, as their primary damage types, and you can't really change that. Rails are pretty nice though. But yeah, rails are nice. I don't really have much to say about rails. I mean, you use them in PvE, you use them on sniper ships. Not really much to say there. Projectile turrets. This is where it gets interesting. As with the hybrid, your ammo does change your range, but with projectile ammo, it changes damage type as well with ammo, and more importantly, it gives you a tracking modifier. So there's certain types of ammo that are better for tracking, and there's certain types of ammo that are better at longer ranges, shorter ranges. But more importantly, they do different damage types. However, the primary damage type is, if I remember this correctly, explosive. And that is for autocannons and artillery both. The other interesting thing is projectile weapons use no capacitor. You do not use any capacitor at all while firing these weapons. So even if you've been neutered to 0 cap, you can still be doing full DPS. The thing about projectiles, though, is, what is it? They have a short optimal and a large fall off. Your optimal is where you do 100% of your damage, and by the time you get to one fall off, you're doing, you're missing like a certain amount of the time. I think it's like 50% or something like that. Point here being is you want to stay in a range that is under your fall off plus accuracy, and there's skills that'll improve this. We'll get to that. Optimal and fall off, two important terms. And then there's lasers. These do EM and thermal damage. The thing about them is they don't have ammo. You load your charge crystal and it's there, and reloading charge crystals is instant. They use the most capacitor out of any of the guns, and the closer range charges do more damage, but they also use more cap. So if you're at a farther range, you're using less cap. That's the nice thing about them. So let's move on to slide number 2. Pew, pew, pew. Gunnery skills. A lot of times in the game, you'll hear more experienced players telling you to train your gunnery skills or your weapons auxiliary skills or whatever. For this example, I chose to use small turret in the bottom left. However, that can be any size turret. The turret depends on your type, so it would be small hybrid, small projectile, small laser. However, if you follow the line to the right across the screen, you will find that there's a blank specialization. Well, that specialization is in fact in the type of weapon, so it would be small pulse lasers, or small beam lasers, or like small blasters, you know? So that's what you have to remember about those. So in fact, to be a master of small weapons, you would in fact have to have small turret, as well as both of the specializations. And the specializations obviously take longer to train, and larger turrets also take longer to train than smaller ones. Gunnery itself is a 1x multiplier, like all the core skills, very easy to train. Now, as you can see, there's a whole cloud of skills that comes out of gunnery. Surgical Strike improves your damage by the smallest modifier out of any of them, out of any of the skills that improve your damage. Controlled Bursts reduces the cap usage of your turrets. Completely useless for Minmatar, very useful for Amar, and pretty useful for everyone else. Motion Prediction increases your tracking and is required for the close range. So if you're going to be specializing in autocannons, pulses, or blasters, you need Motion Prediction to a certain level to be able to train the specialization skill. Sharpshooter. It increases your optimal range and is needed for the long-range weapons like beams, pulses, and beams, rails, and artillery. My bad, I was thinking lasers. Anyways, rapid firing increases the rate at which your turrets fire, therefore increasing your DPS. Quite simple. It also increases the cap usage, obviously, but controlled bursts offsets that, unless you're Minmatar, in which case you don't have to care about capacitor. Trajectory analysis increases your fall-off distance. But yeah, that's the way these things work. And the way it works is your small turret skill gives you a good modifier to your damage. Your specialization also gives you a pretty good modifier percentage-wise. And Surgical Strike gives you... The way it works is your turret gives you 5% per skill level, specialization gives you 3% per skill level, and Surgical Strike gives you 2% per skill level. Another thing to remember is specialization lets you use a tier 2 turret, which lets you use tier 2 ammo, and by default tier 2 turrets have a higher base damage. So always good to train for tier 2. And it's more effective than the high metas, like Meta 4 components will cost more than Tier 2. So you're actually saving yourself money. We're talking about doing optimal damage here, obviously. I mean, of course you can always settle for less but while you're training, but once you have the skills, really no excuse. Missiles. Now this is where shit gets really convoluted. Alright, so there's 3 levels. You have your smalls, the cruiser levels, and the battleship levels. And then there's capitals. We're not talking about cap ships at all. No intention of mentioning anything about them this tutorial. Small missiles are divided into 2 groups. Your rockets, which are your close range, and your standard missiles, which are your long range. Now rockets obviously fire rockets as their ammo. Standard missile launchers fire light missiles as their ammo. Alright. Now watch this. You need standard missiles to a certain skill to progress to the next to the cruiser level missile skills like heavy assault and heavy. Those require standard missiles. Rockets are completely irrelevant. With turrets beforehand, if we go back, you need your small turret to a certain level to get your medium turret. 4 it is, I do believe. Anyways, rockets, as you notice, there's also a second ammo type listed, and that's defenders. Defender missiles shoot down enemy missiles, and they're used in certain tactical situation. But basically, you want to be shooting as many of them as you can, and rockets have the highest rate of fire. So that's why I put defenders there. Technically, you could shoot defenders out of any of these launchers, but it wouldn't be effective. Anyways, cruiser levels. You have your heavy assault missiles, commonly referred to as HAMs, Ham Spam Drakes, Ham Spam Tengu. It is all the rage these days, and they fire assault missiles, and then you have your heavy launchers, which fire heavy missiles. Same as with rockets and standards, same as with the turrets. The heavy assault missiles are closer range, higher damage, and heavy missiles are longer range, lower damage. And to get to the battleship level, you need to train heavy missiles again. So heavy assault missiles, quote-unquote, a dead end. And obviously each of these has its own specialization. Once you get heavy assault to 5, you can go heavy assault specialization, unlock your tier 2 launcher. It's nice. And that allows you to use the Tech 2 missiles, which are more complex than the Tech 2 ammo. Tech 2 ammo has its own name, and there's like a close range one and a long range one for each and whatnot. With missiles, though, there's 2 types of them. There's the Fury, and then there's the other ones. The Fury are the ones that are the closer range, quote-unquote, ones and do more damage. So I know about them because they're relevant to me and my life. I forget what the other ones are called, though. Sorry. Kind of a bad tutorial in that sense, but whatever. It's pretty simple to figure out. Just open up Tech 2 missiles in the market. You're not stupid. You can do it. I believe in you. Battleship level. Torpedoes, close range, fire torpedoes. Cruise missile launchers, fire cruise missiles, long range. Big whoop, same deal. Whoosh, boom, pow. Sounds missiles make. Anyways, missile launcher operation is your base skill, and then there are 5 +1 auxiliary skills. Alright, so let's start from the top and go clockwise. Rapid launch increases your rate of fire. Now, the interesting thing you might have noticed is with Tech 2 missiles, you don't need any of these skills. These are purely optional, but they help. Alright, warhead upgrades increases your damage. Then target navigation prediction decreases the factor of your enemy's movement in your missile damage. Missile damage is computed using your enemy's movement relative to you, the missile's velocity, the missile's flight time, and the signature radius. Alright, and then we have missile projection and missile bombardment, as well as guided missile precision. Yeah, right on. I think that covered all of them, right? Yeah, point here being is they increase the flight time, the flight speed, and then you have your damage increase, the rate of fire increase, and the decrease of velocity and signature radius as factors. That's what these do. So basically more damage all around. There's none of that little like uses less cap trickery that there is with the turrets. Right. Tank, HP, and Macho. There's 2 types of tanks in this game, armor and shield, and each of them has an active and a passive variant. Active armor tanks use reppers, armor repair modules, and hardeners. They're used mainly in PvE. And, yeah. Because passive armor tanks do not work in PvE. Passive armor tanks, what you do is you put on a big plate, as big a plate as you can manage, and then you slap on some resists like energized adaptive nano plating or adaptive nano plating, depending on whether you have spare CPU in your fit, as well as a damage control. And that buffs your resists, and basically it's a buffer tank. You're hoping that you kill them before they kill you. And this is used in PvP, and it's ineffective in PvE, because armor, unlike shields, does not regen by itself, nor does it get automatically restored when you dock at a station. Now, shields. There are 2 types of tanks, active and passive. An active tank uses a booster, shield boost amplifier, which increases how well that booster functions. The booster obviously gives you more shield hit points per cycle, and hardeners as well to increase the resists. Seeing as how shields have less total resist than armor, and 0% resistance to EM, it's very important to properly harden your shield. And there's also passive modules. Hardeners can be either active or passive, and let's talk about slots for a second here. Armor, everything you do with an armor tank uses a low slot. Okay, reppers, plates, resist, damage control, hardeners, those all go in low slots. Armor tankers are most commonly Amar, Galente, and Minmatar have like a 50-50 split of whether they shield tank or not. Shield buffers are usually very popular in like PvP buffer fits, so you can use those low slots for damage modules, because you see that's the thing about armor tanks. First, putting a plate on your ship slows it down. Your warp align time is longer, the physical ship is slower, it turns slower, so on and so forth. The other problem is it takes up low slots, and low slots are what you use to fit your plus damage modules and your plus tracking modules. So it's kind of painful like that. Shield. Hardeners, boosters, and boost amplifiers are all fitted into your mid slots. So that means you have all of your lows for whatever you want. You can stick a damage control in there, some ballistic control systems, really whatever floats your boat. The problem is now you don't have mediums for utility. Like, you can't fit like a warp drive, a micro warp drive, and a warp scrambler, and a Weber, and still have room for your tank. So that's what you're giving up there. And let's talk about the final tank that kind of breaks a little bit of the slot rules here, is the passive tank, which has extenders, hardeners, which we talked about. Extenders go into your medium slots and increase your shield hit points. And since your shield regen depends on how much shield you have total, increasing your shield hit points effectively increases your tank as far as regen goes, on top of giving you a nice buffer. As I mentioned previously, shield buffers are used in PvP a lot too, so a ship can fit all gank into its low slots and just run a bunch of extenders and hope to outlast. Basically like an armor buffer, but different. Also, relays. That's what I wanted to talk about. Relays, unlike all the other shield tanking modules, go into low slots. And like all modules, they obviously have a fall off. So after 2 of them, that's pretty much as many as you're going to need to fit. And then you can fit your ballistic control systems and whatever. And passive tanks were made famous by the Drake. The Drake is very famous right now for its ability to have a ridiculous passive tank because its ship bonus gives it resists. There's also skills that increase the resistance that you gain from hardeners or like passive plates and such. They're called compensation, like EM shield compensation or EM armor compensation. And they're based off of the hull upgrade skill, which is what armor's based off of, or the shield operation, shield management skills, which is what the shield is based off of. So shield tanking, in a way, requires more skills to an extent. Because your shield management and shield operation give you more hit points and more regen for your shield. Meanwhile, with armor, you just need your hull upgrades. But the trick here is, to fit a repper, you also need your armor repair systems. So it ends up being more or less the same kind of skills. Not really that different in that sense. Moving around, right. Navigation, you have afterburners and micro warp drives. Both of them feed off of navigation as a skill, increases your ship speed by 5% per level, and that's your base ship speed before any afterburner micro warp driving. Acceleration control increases the speed bonus gained from micro warp drives and afterburners. Afterburners also have the afterburners skill, which increases their cycle time, so your afterburner is on for longer per cycle. So it basically decreases the cap that it uses, and then fuel conservation literally decreases the cap that it uses to launch a cycle. Micro warp drive only has high-speed maneuvering to it, which obviously decreases your cap usage. Yay. Now the detriments of a micro warp drive. It needs more fitting than an afterburner. It reduces your total ship capacitor. And on top of that, it also increases your signature radius when you have it on, so you're easier to hit. And also on top of that, if you get warp disrupted or you're in a warp disruption bubbles, I think, affected. Not positive about bubbles, but the actual module on ships does, so it'll turn it off and your speed will be gone. On the other hand, it gives you a lot more speed than an afterburner, so pick your poison. And there's also modules which can increase your ship's speed. Overdrive injectors give you a bonus to your afterburner speed or micro warp drive speed. Nanostructure makes your ship lighter, therefore also giving you a bonus. However, nanos got nerfed. They're not as overpowered as they used to be. And then there's implants. Implants are for those really hardcore interceptor pilots who want to be flying around at like 5 kilometers a second in their faction fit Dramiel or something. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Power, right. We've been talking about capacitor this whole time, and there are two skills which determine your capacitor. Energy systems operation decreases your capacitor recharge time, and energy management increases your total capacitor capacity. Rigs and modules. There are rigs that that help with your cap recharge or cap capacity, like capacitor control circuit, useful rig for cap stability if you want your ship to be cap stable. There are also cap boosters which go into a mid slot and consume cap booster charges, which are very large in volume but give you a boost to your cap. So those are very useful on like PvP type ships, or some people use them on PvE and just say screw it to cap stable. I'd rather haul around these very large cap charges and use them to boost my cap. And there's also modules that you can fit in either your medium or your low slot that'll increase your cap recharge. And then finally, we've been talking about modules and how do we get it to fit. There are two main skills that are responsible for this: engineering and electronics. Engineering increases your ship's total grid. Electronics increases your ship's total CPU, which are the two things that limit what your ship can fit. Advanced weapons upgrades decreases the power needs of weapons modules, so it's very useful for fitting more powerful weapons onto your ship. If your fit is not tight, you're clearly not using your ship to its best potential. Not saying all fits should be tight. There's definitely a room out there for people who are still training their skills to fly ships that are sort of more loose in their fittings, but they won't be as effective. And, you know, in like PvP, every little bit counts. In PvE, when you're more efficient, you do missions faster, earn your money better. Weapons upgrades, since you need weapons upgrades to 5 to even start training advanced weapons upgrades, and advanced weapons upgrade is a higher modifier as well, so it takes longer to train. Weapons upgrades decreases the CPU needs of your weapons modules, so useful for fitting as well. There are also modules which go in the low slot that increase either of these. There's auxiliary power cores which increase your grid, and then there's like CPU processing units or something like that that increase your CPU. Most of the time, not worth the slot. Most of the time. And then there's implants that will increase your grid or CPU on any ship that you enter with that clone by up to 5%. So yeah, but the 5% ones are expensive, so just watch out for those. But yeah, you can do it.